After his wife Abby returned from working on a holistically managed farm in South Africa in 2005, she and her husband Spencer sat down to create their own holistic context statement. In this week's episode of the Nutrition Heretic podcast, we talk with Spencer Smith, learn what a holistic context is, and how creating one for yourself is important for anyone who wants to engage more meaningfully with their farming, their family, and their food choices.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
If you're still confused about what to eat and not getting the results you thought you'd get by going organic, go to nutritionheretic.com and download the shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague for free. The shit list details what health food companies want you to believe about the crap they peddle and why the real foods they're meant to replace are far better. Stop letting big health food dump all over you and download the shit list today.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Nutrition Heretic. I'm Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic, and thank you for being here today. As you know, last week we spoke with a gentleman named Will Harris of White Oak Pastures, and he was talking about regenerative agriculture, how he's brought back this 150-year-old farm that has been passed down through his family to farm for the future. His land is now holding nutrients. It's holding water. He's not suffering the way his neighbors who refuse to leave the aggressive pesticide-laden farming practices that are so popular in our country. And his farm is thriving. And so today, we're going to be talking to someone else about other aspects of this type of regenerative agriculture and in particular, holistic management. And this is a really interesting topic for me because when we talk about our health, people love to talk about mind-body connection. And, if the gut is not doing well, then the brain can't think well. And then, how the soul and the spirituality comes into it. And, here today we have our guest heretic who is Spencer Smith of the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management. And he's going to talk to us a little bit more about the overall connection we have to the land. I think he will at least, and as well as how we can connect better with our food sources, how we can connect better with our intentions for farming. And with that, welcome, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Nice to be on your show.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I know we just to let people know he's really rural. Like really out there. And so, we had some difficulty getting, connected, and he may, sound a little bit like he's underwater every once in a while, but that just speaks to the fact that this guy is walking the talk. So, tell us a little bit about the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management, what you do, and, what was I on the right track in saying that this is similar to when people talk about their bodies having this mind-body connection and the soul connection and the spiritual connection? Is that what holistic management of your ranch means to you?
I guess so, but it goes a little bit further.
Right.
So in order to have that gut connection with the microbiome and everything that's intrinsically there, we also have to remember where that microbiome comes from, right? Where do we get those bugs in our gut that give us this health and help our body function correctly?
Right.
And as it turns out, it comes from the soil. And so the microbiome of the soil and the microbiome of the gut are quite similar. And so there's working that to bring nutrient density and bring opportunity and increase production and profit for farmers and ranchers who are really grounded and working on the land is kind of what we do.
Right.
We are part of the Savory Institute Hub Network. So we work globally with a network of other holistic management professionals to bring this type of agriculture knowledge to farmers and ranchers and people of all sorts all over the world.
Right. And, I beat this to death, and I'll probably keep beating it to death until I get somebody who is an expert in this. But one of the things that I've been learning since I moved to Hawaii is Korean natural farming. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that practice. But one of the things that we do, and you're talking about the microbiome, and one of the things that we do in that is we cultivate the molds that are naturally occurring in the soil, because that's those white things you see on the tips of the weeds that you pull up, right? And, we're using those to our advantage to create more biodiversity in the soil, and helping those to flourish, because those in turn help the crops that we actually want to flourish. So this is really important to me. Now, one of the reasons why I asked about this type of connection to the soil is because I saw one of your talks, and you talked about holistic context, and that's what that sounded like to me, kind of coming up with this statement of how you want to be in relationship to your farm. Can you talk a little bit about that holistic context?
Right. So a holistic context is simply that, that statement of truth that's for you. What is it that this life, this operation, this landscape must provide for you in terms of your quality of life? And as it turns out, most of us don't ever really sit down and think about that. Mm-hmm. But it really is quite empowering and helpful to develop an idea of where's my life going to go in terms of, my social life, my environment that whether it's the one that I get my food from, or if I'm in an urban environment, what type of environment must I be in to be safe and secure and feel enriched and fulfilled. And then, of course, there's the monetary aspects. So, in order to be truly successful and have a sustaining business model, we need to do it within that triple bottom line result. And so that in its essence is holistic management. Alan Savory developed it many years ago, and started with the idea of a holistic context, and then you test all of your decisions against that context to develop the future resource base and the quality of life that you want going forward.
Right. It sounds like essentially what every business is told to do, which is write a mission statement. How is this business going to develop, and then compare your actions to whether or not they're fulfilling that mission statement.
Right. So it's even deeper than a mission statement, because we're looking beyond ourself and even our business as to what is this landscape, this environment, society, what do we want it to look like way after we're gone?
Right.
And so when we're developing that, it's how are the decisions I'm making now going to create this opportunity for future generations.
And this is important, especially for those of us who are parents, right? And grandparents. We don't want to leave our kids with nothing. We don't want them to inherit soil that's so poor that it can't sustain life anymore.
Well, yeah, and we're almost there now, as it turns out, with the way things have been done for the last several years. Our soil is, lost most of its life, or a lot of the soil has. There's still, a lot of healthy soil and a lot of people that are doing right by their landscape. Don't get me wrong. But when you look at where the nutrient density in our food and our fruits and vegetables has gone over the last 40, 50 years, it's begs the question, why?
Hmm.
Why does carrot now have 25% of the vitamins and minerals that it would have had 40, 50 years ago?
Right.
And the answer really is how we take care of our soil.
Right.
It's the biology in the soil that allow for those vitamins and minerals to become plant available.
Hmm.
And once the plant takes it up, then we have the opportunity to take it up as well.
Yeah, and I think that for people who can't connect with that idea, it's a good idea choice for them to either go to a remote area, not too far from where they live. For example, if you're in the United States, maybe you go, up some mountain where there's some berries or something growing, and then compare that to what you get at the supermarket. Or if you're able to travel to another country, I mean, I continuously find just phenomenal food in other countries, where the model may not be ideal and it may not be what you're doing as far as holistic management, but there is more of a respect for the rules of nature. And food is just totally different in other places. Have you found that too?
Yeah, I find a lot of good food here as well. I don't want to
Right.
discount all the great work that farmers and ranchers do, but agriculture is taught, very chemically.
Yes.
You ask your farm advisor, or if you're a young farmer or even an old farmer and you have an issue, where do you go? If you go to the government or you go to an expert in the field, they're going to help, similar as it would be in the healthcare system, help prescribe a chemical treatment for a symptom that you're seeing on your landscape.
Right.
And all of that has simplified the life in our soil and led to further issues.
I think that's a great way of putting it, that it's simplified the life in the soil. So by any chance, do you recall what your holistic context is for your life, for your ranch?
Yeah, absolutely. In a nutshell, we want to live in a place that, has lots of biodiversity, fresh air, clean water bubbling out of the springs that we have in our, on our mountain. And we want to be able to raise our family and raise our children in such a way that they can, have every opportunity that we can grant them. And we want to do this, by farming and ranching and teaching our kids to be grounded and respect, the nature and earth and everything that goes along with it. And we also want to have the ability to offer the most nutritious food possible to them and their peers.
Right, right. So then how did what were you doing before holistic management was even a concept for you? What were you doing? Were is this a family ranch that you have? Was this passed down to you?
Right. So, my wife and I just moved back to my family's ranch a year ago. Before that, I was managing ranches in Nevada.
Okay.
And so I was utilizing holistic management there as well, as a way to, build back the resource, and increase the soil's ability to grow more food, more pasture for the livestock that we were running out there.
Okay. But where was the was there a transition? Were you doing conventional farming and then this term that you just needed to investigate came up? I know that your wife was involved in a trip to, I believe it was the Africa Center for Holistic Management.
Right. So Alan Savory, the guy that came up with this idea, he's been in the livestock production world, he is, everybody's heard of him and has. And there's a lot of people that thought that they understood what holistic management was in terms of, agriculture, livestock production anyway. So, I definitely heard of him. But as it turns out, my wife, when she was in college, she was the editor of the college paper. And Alan came and did a talk at the university. And at that time, at that point, she got the opportunity to interview him for the paper. After that, hour-long interview, it so profoundly changed her that she said, she thought to herself she had to go find this out. And so he, right there, in the office where they did the interview, they set up an internship. Abby moved to South Africa for a few months. and worked on a couple different holistically managed cattle farms in South Africa. So then, she had always been promoting this idea to me. And then when I became the manager of a cattle company in Nevada, I was able to start utilizing these ideas and increase the production and the ability of the land to grow more grass, and was able to find success with it. And from there, we applied to and teamed up with the Savory Institute and moved back to the family ranch. And now we offer holistic management training and consulting for farmers and ranchers, kind of all over.
Right. So could you give us, without giving away all your trade secrets, could you give us a little bit of a bird's eye view of what they can expect by going down this holistic management path? And not only results wise, but what does it look like? Is it a system of rotation of animals? Is it a system of rotation of crops? Or, what's the kind of, not one shot, but encapsulated description of how you're achieving so much?
Right. Okay. So we are, for all intents and purposes, mimicking nature. The grasslands of the world, all of these different, forest ecosystems, grassland ecosystems, you name it, all evolved with animals present. So now our current food system has kind of taken that away and gone into monocrop agriculture, which at the same time has, resulted in its own problems with, pest species and diseases in these production type models, which it's very easy to grow corn if all you're growing is corn, right? But if a corn blight comes through and, it can potentially decimate your whole crop for the season. Nature hates a monoculture. So part of what we do is that we set up production models that mimic nature. It has proven to be the most effective way to turn these landscapes around. Landscapes that are so degraded, they're really not even recognizable after they've been in holistic management for a few years. So we utilize livestock, animal impact, and grazing as a tool to help revitalize, kind of jumpstart the biology in the soil, create a soil profile that will germinate seeds that'll allow air and water to infiltrate, so we can have arable, fertile soils.
Right.
Now, that's simply in livestock agriculture, on pastures, rangeland, and so on. Or it can be used in cropping systems to help bring back and increase the cropping potential of, say, row crop farms or whatever. But it's basically a way of naturally adding and bringing back the soil health and fertility that we need to grow healthy food.
All right. So you're bringing the animals back, really just the way, I forget what the name of the book is. I should have looked this up before we got on, but there was a really good book a few years ago that came out a few years ago. And I believe it was like the top 100 species that shaped our planet. And it went from everything from, you say, ants to elephants. And everything in between, amoebae and, all kinds of, protozoa that affected our landscape and turned the soil into what it is today, or what it should be today, what it was until we started destroying it. So what you're saying is that you're kind of going back to that system of understanding that there is diversity in the soil and that nature doesn't like straight lines.
Right. And, you've got to remember that over the last millions of years, these, plant species evolved with periodic defoliation and that disturbance event that allowed them to flourish. Otherwise, the species of forages and, fruits and vegetables, whatever, that couldn't handle that, they left this planet long before we ever came on it.
Right.
And so when you re-add livestock to that system in, not just in a, random way, but in a very purposeful manner, you can increase the capacity of the plants and the soil to harvest the sunlight energy and turn it into carbohydrate. Those carbohydrates that are being fed into the soil profile that the biology in the soil consume and create that organic matter, or, carbohydrates that we can use above ground as nourishment for ourselves, or, food and fiber, or, structure, buildings, whatever.
Yeah. So you must just laugh at these people who claim that, or either that or get infuriated by the people who claim that animals are destroying the planet and we need to take, not raise animals if we want to save the planet.
Right. And, I don't get infuriated. It's just a very linear view. The environment is super complex, right? I mean,
Right.
If you remove one thing from it, it doesn't mean that you're going to get a calculated result.
Exactly.
If you remove livestock from the landscape or remove grazing animals from the landscape, you're going to end up with over-rested plants that cannot flourish. They'll get choked out by their own litter. And in an arid, dry environment like the American West, you start to desertify, or, like Africa.
Right.
So places that were green and lush and had great dynamic grassland ecosystems are now turning into desert and blowing away because of either the misuse of animals or the lack of animals altogether. So you can go and see what rest does to an environment, especially in the arid West, by going to, say, a national park or something that has removed animals, livestock, whatever, from that environment, and you can go and see, what does that soil profile look like? Is it open and porous so that plants can germinate and and recycle those nutrients, or is it hard capped, and is there a lot of bare ground in between the individual plants?
Yeah. So is that what happened with the Dust Bowl?
Well, the Dust Bowl was a little bit different, and so it's important to remember that. Yeah, so what happened with the Dust Bowl? World War One, the Allied front needed a lot of wheat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so paid all of these farmers and kind of to go to the Midwest, the breadbasket of the world, and plant wheat so that they could have it. And they gave them good money, and the perennial pastures with roots 10 feet or 30 feet deep, great landscape. They went and they started tilling the soil, and they oxidized all of those nutrients and a lot of that carbon that was in the soil and a lot of the biology in the soil, and they started planting wheat. So wheat's an annual crop, meaning that it only lives 1 year. It has a very shallow root system. With that, they tilled and tilled and tilled, and since they were not reincorporating any of that vegetation back, it was kind of an extractive process, similar to the way a lot of agriculture is still done today. So they're pulling the nutrients, pulling all that away from the soil until the soil profile could no longer, hold itself together. There wasn't enough roots and vegetation to keep it down. So then they had a drought, nowhere near like the drought that California saw last year.
Right.
And the wind started to blow. And then all of a sudden, Kansas ended up in New York, and people realized that they really had a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So in your mind, knowing what you know now, was there something, was there a smarter way of producing food to avoid that issue?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And we know that the same problems haven't gone away. I mean, if you look at the amount of topsoil that erodes and leaves, the Great Plains or the breadbasket of the world today, it's astonishing. It's like 10 tons of topsoil are lost for every 1,000 pounds of food produced or something. I can't remember what the exact statistic is, but yeah, our resource is blowing and washing away down the river every year. It's not as visible now because we can apply chemicals to it and still get a crop of corn, whatever, soybeans to grow but there's very little biology and nutrition left in that soil profile. And so because we can add chemical fertilizers and still get some type of vegetation to grow on these landscapes, so that's part of the modern marvels of science, I guess.
So with with what you're doing is maybe a better way to say it. Are you building topsoil?
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the principles of what we do, is trying to increase our resource. You've got to understand that for most farmers and ranchers, their land base is the single largest investment that they're ever going to make. And so when you think about it that way, it only makes good sense to try and, build that resource and build that investment as you go. So what we're doing with holistic management, mimicking nature and building topsoil through biological means. And as things have gone on, we've been able to learn exactly how these things have happened and how evolution has brought these opportunities to us, and we can mimic it. And so rather than the wolves chasing the bison around the country, we can do things a lot more deliberately and increase our soil organic matter, nutrients, plant available nutrients in our soil profile, and create a lot of opportunity. And that in itself is a part of the reason why holistic management producers are doubling, tripling production and profitability on their farms and ranches.
Right. So it's well worth the investment. Does it take you longer, or is there any undesirable part of the way that you farm? Because the excuse is that I was just going to say that the excuse is that the chemical way is easy. You just throw the chemicals out there, and which, when I talk to some just regular, so to speak, organic farmers, they say, no, when I did the conventional stuff, I had to make sure I sprayed after every rain, and I had to do this on this schedule. Is it that rigid, or is it more forgiving?
Oh, no, it's a lot more forgiving. Once you get started, it's there's a lot of planning that goes into it, and you got to make sure that you're what's happening is happening deliberately. But yeah, you're just kind of the orchestrator of the events, and allow things to happen. And once kind of how to build soil, how to increase your resource, it's a pretty easy way of going about business.
Right. About how much topsoil do you think that you're building per year?
Well, that is. That's a great question. So there's several different ways to measure soil building, right? So it could be the decomposition of litter on top of the soil, how much. So that would be like building soil decomposition pathways. Mm-hmm. And another way to do it is by, managing for the healthiest perennial grass crops, grasslands that you can. So the perennial grasses produce roots that go really deep. 70 to 80% of the carbon that those types of plants produce goes below ground, either in roots or in root exudates. So the roots are always trickling a little bit of that carbohydrate, a little bit of that plant sugar out through their roots to feed the biology in the soil. With holistic management, part of what we do is we time our impact to those plants so that we defoliate or stress those plants at just the right time so that they have the maximum amount of carbohydrates in them.
Okay.
And so then when you do that, you stress that plant, it exudes all carbohydrates into the soil profile. And so that's the liquid carbon pathway. So all those roots are bound together by mycorrhizal fungi. And that's kind of like the highway system or the internet for plants that allow one plant to supply, sugars or nutrients to another. And to where you can really get that great bond between all of your plants and let them, they share antioxidants and, defense mechanisms and, nitrogen and all the other things that they need to have a healthy grassland ecosystem. So doing that, pumping all the carbon below ground, build soil as well. And so you can measure the amount of soil carbon or humus that you build in your soil going on through the years.
Right. So you can measure it from the depth at which those plants are growing. Is that what you're saying? Sorry, you had a little break up there in the middle. No, it's not. I know that you're rural, so we're being extra forgiving with you. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding where you're going with this.
Right. So the deeper the roots go, the deeper you're making your topsoil horizon, right? So your topsoil, difference between your topsoil and subsoil is largely the depth of your root. So you can control that and push that down that way and increase your resource that way. The other way is through the root exudates of those plants moving through the fungi and being decomposed and turned into organic matter. And that can be measured by doing soil tests at different depths and calculating how much soil carbon or organic matter is in those different samples.
Okay, so you can also do that by testing for you said the soil carbon?
Right, and soil carbon is hugely important because each percent in soil carbon that you increase, per 6 inches will hold 25,000 gallons of water. So if you can take your landscape from 2% carbon to 6 or 8% carbon, you can hold hundreds of thousands more gallons of water per acre, per 6 inches of topsoil.
Wow, that's incredible. So then I have to ask, given you're in California went through a tremendous drought. You've been getting a lot of rain pretty much since the beginning of the year, but you're not out of the woods yet. How did your farm fare? Well, everybody was up in arms about the almonds and everything else that was sucking water.
Yeah, our place fared pretty well, in fact. We did our baseline monitoring 2 years ago, which was still part of that terrible drought. Went into last year was an even worse drought in history. From year over year to changing management, we were able to increase our production by about 30%, which was pretty astonishing. And then results this year, since we did all of that work and saw those benefits, we have had so far a tremendous spring and a lot more plant density and healthier pastures due to it. Okay, sorry, I'm going to repeat what I heard you say again, because you're starting to break up more than you were at the beginning of the conversation. But you were saying that during the drought, you were increasing by 30% per year. Is that what you said? Production? Yeah, grass production. That's what we did in 1 year. So that was pretty during a drought. Then, now drought, so, now our pastures are healthier again. Wow, that's incredible. And then not only in terms of, and I'm pulling this from when we had the discussion with Will Harris last week, but not only in terms of being able to withstand the drought, but when there's a flood, I'm assuming that your soil knows how to handle heavy rains. Maybe not a flood, but when you get heavy rains that would flood maybe your neighbor, your soil probably is a little more ready to accept that water. Right. And so we haven't had the opportunity to experience those kinds of rains yet here, but hopefully when they come, we'll really get to test that out. A guy in North Dakota named Gabe Brown, he's a farmer, holistic management practitioner. He took his soil from less than 2% to over 10 on his farm in Bismarck. Holy mackerel. With that, they had a 13-inch rainfall in 6 hours. Dang. And I was talking to him, and he was doing a slideshow or a presentation at an event that I was at, and he had no flooding, no overland flow. All that water went into his soil, and he was able to keep it and crops on it. All the rest of his neighbors were completely flooded out and had to go, apply for, their losses to their crop insurance. That's insane. But I mean, it's insane good, but it still just goes to show that with a little wisdom, you can really, it's not about fighting Mother Nature. I think this is the problem that agriculture has taken, and as well as the healthcare system. We're always trying to supersede, fight, work against nature and assume that nature always has it out for us. But instead, your system sounds like you're learning to work with it in a holistic way. Right. So we're mimicking nature and doing it very deliberately so that we can see the benefits and build resiliency into our landscape. So take that type of a model and expand it. The Savory Institute has a global goal of reaching 1 billion hectares of grassland. With that, we can feed far more people. We can produce economic stability to societies and rural communities all over the world. And we're having a great time going down the path and seeing a lot of positive effects from it. Right. So what is, if somebody were to start today,
I know it's going to depend on where they're starting from, obviously, as far as how depleted the soil is, how barren the soil is. But let's just take random desert in Africa. I don't even know where to, where to start, or national park, like you said, these dead zones in the national parks. And take that. How long till they start to know that they're you called it a sequestering carbon, correct?
Yeah, so that is part of it, and that's naturally what happens when plants are photosynthesizing, right? They're pumping those carbohydrates into the soil, which then are decomposed by the biology of the soil and turn into soil organic matter, soil carbon. How long before a landscape starts to turn around? Depending on what type of landscape we're starting with, it can happen pretty quickly. It's just, it's a deliberate move, and part of it is learning how to monitor for and understand what the landscape is telling you in the first place. So by looking at what types of vegetations are there in the beginning, will help you learn and make a plan to figure out how to utilize that resource, and then reincorporate as many the nutrients in the mineral cycle as possible. Break that soil crust up so that the air and water can infiltrate, and then all the time you're adding the biology and the nutrients from the dung and the urine of the animal, and very quick you can see new and higher succession plants start to germinate and incorporate those desert lands.
Right. Well, I had to ask the question because we are in this immediate society where, you go on a diet, you lose 3 pounds, gain back 1, and then decide that the diet doesn't work because you gained back 1 pound, and, then you just quit that day, right? So, and the same thing, right. You can see I've been through this, right? So, but, the same thing with, farming or, something else. Oh, I saw a weed. Well, this doesn't work. So now I've got to just scrap the whole thing and start all over again with something else, right? We want this immediate gratification, and we see just anything that we associate as being bad, and we don't continue. We want to abandon it. So, like best case scenario, worst case scenario, what are we looking at? 5 months to 2 years, 3 weeks to 8 months?
Oh, yeah, like I say, so 3 weeks might depend a lot on where you're starting and, what time of year it is.
Right.
But no, within, you will see positive ramifications to your actions, certainly within a year, if you start managing this way.
That's fantastic.
There are, right, I've heard other folks talk about doubling and tripling production in less than 5 years. On a landscape. So that's forage production, which, in turn, moves on to how much resource you can market, and also how much, carbon you can be incorporated in the topsoil and build that resource for future years. So yeah, everybody's different, and that's where that holistic context comes back into it. Because you can apply these same principles to any type of agriculture production or any type of production period. It's a great system. So to say that you can turn this landscape around in 3 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, certainly we could say that. But what we first need to ask is, what are we trying to create? Because oftentimes we do, as an immediate society, take actions. We're really great at taking actions and making decisions that are taking us where we want to be. And so really the hardest part of starting to manage holistically is, first of all, sitting down and articulating what it is that you want, this life, this landscape to provide for you going forward.
Right.
Once you've done that, then you can start making decisions that will heal your landscape, increase your crop production or forage production, and get you into a better place.
Right. So it's keeping your eye on the prize, really. It's a little bit Martin Luther King, I have a dream, right? You set that intention, and that's your framework that you're always coming back to.
Right. And you go ahead.
I was going to say that you measure up, perhaps, every action you take back to that statement. You can always come back home to this statement and decide, okay, is this going to achieve that goal?
Right. Yep, that's exactly right. And we have a set of testing questions that help you make those decisions in the first place.
Okay, and is that part of what you do? You lead people in the courses that you give. You lead people through that line of questioning to help them really get to the core of what they want and what they envision for their future.
Right. I do that. But also once they've done that, the testing guidelines really come into play when they're looking at individual actions. So is this action I'm taking going to address the root cause of the problem or just a symptom of the problem? Most of the money, time, and energy spent on a farm is dealing with symptoms. And I think that probably could go across cultures or across disciplines and be seen in healthcare and in education and into a lot of different parts of society. But you look at a weed and you think that's a problem. When really the weed is just there because we have created a void in the ecosystem that weed has a particular ability to fill that niche. So rather than seeing that weed as a problem or as the problem, let's look at what caused that space on our farm or ranch to, be open to that type of a plant that we view as a pest species. And so, of course, that all goes back to the soil. Oh, go ahead. Oh, yeah. So I was going on weeds tangent. Sorry about that. But
no, that's okay.
What happens or what germinates in your field, in your lawn, in whatever, there's thousands of seeds per square foot on all of this soil, right? But not all of them germinate every year. Why not? Well, part of the reason is the soil biology, and that goes into this idea of succession. So if your soil is simplified to where it's totally bacterial dominated, you're going to start, like if it's really bacterial dominated, you're going to see tap-rooted annual species. Your thistles, mustards, your weeds that people spend a lot of time trying to get off their farm.
Right.
Then if you move up the ladder a little bit, you're on a kind of a annual grassland succession. And so that is predominantly bacterial dominated soil, but there's still a little bit of fungal attributes to it. And so that would be farmers that are farming like corn and wheat and things like that. And that's why farmers in annual production farm or till the soil up quite a bit before they plant their seeds, because they need to knock back the fungal attributes of the soil profile so that their grain crops can germinate ahead of, maybe a higher succession plant like a perennial grass species that's, could potentially outcompete the annual crop.
I just wanted to say, so does that mean that you are not doing any tilling in your system?
I personally, on this farm, don't. We utilize no-till technology. Now, I'm not saying that holistic managers don't utilize tilling. You can utilize all the tools in the toolbox, including, tillage and technology, all the technological advances that farming has to offer. I'm not at all, saying that we've got to go back to doing everything by hand. But it's important to know what the ramifications of those, farm stimuluses are to your resource and to your soil. So yeah, I'm not anti-till by any means, but we on this particular farm don't do any tillage. When we do cropping, we utilize no technology.
So right there, that's a huge time saver, because that's probably the one thing people hate the most is the tilling.
Right. And but again, if I was to go into annual crop production, tilling would then be a viable option, because I would have to simplify that soil to move into the succession to where the life in the soil would trigger those seeds to germinate ahead of something else that may be less favorable in that farming context.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to let you go before we completely lose you. But I did have a couple of questions from one of our listeners. His name is Ravi Sankar Takuru. He's in India, and he wants to know, what's the cheapest way of getting healthy food from a farm? Is this going to cost people a lot to get started, or is it something that
No.
can, is very reasonable,
Yeah.
maybe even, just low cost? For example, many of the things that we use in Korean farming are things that you would just find in your kitchen anyway.
Right.
Fish
Yeah.
guts.
So no, it is very low cost agriculture. I mean, it is, you don't have all of the on-farm inputs. It's more about proper planning and well thought out actions, and timing when you add that stimulus to the environment so that the natural balance works within itself. So the biology and the everything on the farm is part of healing itself, rather than going in and buying external resources and plugging it in. So no, it is very easy to do on a budget.
Okay, so there's no real startup cost then.
No, it's just learning how to learning how the biology works and how the ecosystem works, and then utilizing what you've already got to take your resource into your to design the future resource base that you want.
Right.
So yeah, and I've helped people on small scales with backyard gardeners with rabbits, and vegetable production, all the way to people that are farming in hundreds of thousands of acres. So it crosses all disciplines and scales in all environments.
Right, right. Now, he had a second question, but I think we answered that already, which is how to create climate resilient agriculture. So the crops that can withstand the heavy rains and severe sunshine. And I think we pretty much covered that in saying that it's once you recreate the health of the soil, then it can nourish the plants sufficiently to withstand the sun, for example, or absorb those heavy rains so that you're not getting everything washing away.
Right. And then, of course, polycultures, right? So
yes.
Each of the different plants in your production system add a different type of, sugar, carbohydrate to the soil, which feeds different biology, which then make different nutrients available to the plants and improves the entire, resource across the board. So, so polycultures and healthy soil are
right.
Mimicking the natural way that plants have grown for millions of years, tends to be the best way to grow plants now.
Right. That's fantastic. And that's one of the things that I've learned as far as we talked about weeds before, is that the weeds give us a lot of clues and give us a lot of, understanding about what their role is. Like you said, they're we consider them a pest, but and they will fill a niche or become opportunistic when the conditions are right. But that's also giving us some information about our soil that we can use to our advantage when we understand it. So that's powerful. I'm not sure. See, now I have this question. I wasn't going to ask you, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask you because our last person didn't really know how to answer it. I'm still not 100% sure I understand what it is. Do you know what the heck a tender is? It's
a tender?
It's a tender, not like chicken tenders, but a sprout that I guess is like a 6-inch plant grown in a medium. So and then I asked her if it was more like a plant start. I don't know if that's I don't know if tenders are the Canadian word because she's in Canada for a starter plant, but she wants to know what's a good medium to grow 6-inch plants in. So when you're, I guess when you're starting at the farmer's market, let's say you wanted to, you buy in those little pots. What would be in a suitable medium that would be holistic in nature? Would it just be creating that soil on your property and then using that soil straight? Do you want to incorporate something else?
Right. So, so there are a couple different, she may be talking about fodder. I'm not sure. Fodder is about 6 inches and you put it in a tray and you sprout like barley seeds or whatever for juicing, and a lot of people are into the fodder systems. Or she could be talking about starting young plants, and the best medium for growing anything is healthy soil. So I would figure out what it was that I was trying to accomplish, and then start going down the path of creating a soil profile. Either it was in a greenhouse or out in your pastures to start the plants that you're after. But yeah, by all means, the best medium for growing plants is healthy soil, and you can use compost and biochar and manure and all types of different ways to add fertility to small plots, or you can use purposeful management to add fertility and increase the resource over large landscapes.
Right, because when people normally do starts, they are buying these bags of topsoil, and then they got the peat moss that comes down from Canada, and they've got perlite and vermiculite and all these things, which, as far as I understand, their purpose is to some extent really just to keep the containers themselves light. Not necessarily for nutrition. I guess some of them also hold water better than just the straight up topsoil that they're selling you. For someone who doesn't.
So a lot of that stuff in the bagged mixes is, decomposing organic matter, right? So it's a lot of mulch and composted goods. That's why it's so light, is it's, a lot of carbon in it. And that's also why it holds so much water.
Okay.
And then, a lot of the other things that are added to it have calcium and a lot of different nutrients there for your plant to take up.
Right. So if somebody is doing this from, let's say they're doing it in a greenhouse, they can take that soil from their healing landscape to grow, because that I would think it would be ideal. Otherwise, if they don't have, let's say they live in the city and they still want to do some kind of planting, gardening on their windowsill. Is there a solution that is less plastic intensive and less Monsanto reliant that they can go to?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go and just recycle their own kitchen waste and have a little compost situation, that would definitely feed their windowsill gardens and small, situations. They're all that, the kitchen waste as far as leftover kale or whatever, that's very high in vitamins and minerals, right? That's why we eat it.
Right.
But if we allow it to biologically decompose in, say a compost manner, and then add that to our flower bed or to our greenhouse starts, we can then add, basically very similar good nutrition and attributes to that, either potting soil or soil that you just dug up and you need to add some fertility to.
Right.
I would start with utilizing grass clippings and just about everything that's biological in nature, is made up of carbon and a lot of other nutrients as well. And all those things need to be recycled into the soil profile.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Spencer, for spending time with us today and giving us a really good solid grasp of what you do there. Can you tell us a little bit about the different types of courses that you offer before we go? Just I know that your website is jeffersonhub.com. Any tips on just the different types of courses and things you can help people along with, and how much of this can be done remotely versus having to come to the ranch?
Right. So actually, I travel around quite a bit and help people and put on workshops. So our workshops are, a general introduction to holistic management, which goes into how these ecosystems function and how to help them function in a healthy way. Planned grazing, how to get your livestock, your animals of whatever variety to the right place at the right time to increase the soil's potential to, be healthy and produce more foraged food. Financial planning, how to make sure that your farm business or whatever your financial system is profitable every year. And then biological monitoring, which really digs in deep into how ecosystems work and how to manage for health ecosystem function. So those are the main in-person courses. I also do some consulting work. And then we have online courses offered through the Savory Institute as well. And if you send me an email or reach out to us on the website, we can certainly answer any of those questions. And then, of course, also I've got a vast network of people producing the very finest grass-fed finished beef, pork, chicken, lamb, and as well as vegetable products all over the West. So if that's something that anybody's interested in, please have them reach out, and we will get them in contact with people that are really doing things purposefully.
Great. Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to have your link on our website at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. And, you can go directly to Spencer's website, which is jeffersonhub.com, sign up for his email newsletter. And I believe, if people sign up for Savory Institute courses via your website, you have a coupon code for them, correct? They can save about 10%, I think, on the courses.
That's right. And that's all things that I think the Savory Institute offers. I think they have a coupon code or a discount code that we can help out with. So
awesome. Well, thanks again. Thank you so much. You have been gracious, putting up with me having to ask you 2 and 3 times what you just said, but you've been a great sport. Thank you so much. Don't let this opportunity slip you by, folks. It's this is especially if you're parents and you want to preserve land for your children in the future. Go check out Spencer's stuff at jeffersonhub.com. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian.
Bye-bye.
The Nutrition Heretic podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nikola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Linda Hansen. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter at NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you just want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Thanks.